Thank you for downloading The Luminous Mind, episode 34.
Let them struggle, which is always hard for parents to let their kids struggle, but if we let our kids struggle, then they will learn how to do hard things.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Emily Dyke. Emily is the co-founder of Math Inspirations and the author of Hands-on Math and 10 Things Every Parent Should Know About Math. Emily's pursuits of professional teaching began at Brigham Young University in the Mathematics Education Program. Soon, Emily's mentor, renowned math education guru, Dr. Blake Peterson, asked Emily to join him in his research and teaching others in her program. Under Dr. Peterson, Emily's mastery of art teaching in deep conceptual understandings of math. After years of study, Emily moved to Yuma, Arizona to teach at Yuma High School. What did she discover? That all the great theories that she had learned didn't work. At least not in the current education model. It wasn't until she started teaching her nieces and nephews that the discovery method was born. Since then, Emily has worked with parents from all over the country to help them apply the discovery method and watch their families use math in a powerful way to become more self-reliant thinkers. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on our show because I really think that math is definitely an area that a lot of parents struggle to feel, competent enough to teach. At least that's my own personal. You just found something personal out about me.
It does seem to be the topic that has the most divide as far as people either love it or they hate it.
Yeah, and it can be a point of learning that stops people from homeschooling because they're like, I can't teach algebra, so I'm not even going to bother.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to briefly tell us about yourself and your hobbies maybe, and then go into your profession? Tell us about your curriculum that you have.
Sure, yeah. So I have two beautiful little girls. I have a 3-year-old named Ellie and a little almost 2-year-old named Layla. So I'm not quite into homeschooling yet. And then I have a wonderful husband who supports me in everything. His name is Joe. And he and I actually teach together. So we have this business that we do. The two of us. I just happen to be more of the voice than he does. And let's see, some of my hobbies, I absolutely love playing volleyball. Volleyball is one of my favorite pastimes. And then solving puzzles of any kind. I absolutely love solving puzzles, crossword puzzles, math puzzles, Sudoku, all that stuff is my favorite. And then teaching math, of course, is one of my favorite things. So my husband and I started a company called Math Inspirations, where we do a couple things right now. We go into homes and teach homeschooling families math. So we teach the kids math and help the parents feel confident helping their students with their math. And then we also, which is kind of our newest thing, is we have a course for parents in which we help parents feel confident with teaching math in their home and making it something that's really meaningful and powerful and not just giving them a textbook and having their kids go work. So that's what we're doing right now.
That's awesome. So you said, I met Emily at the Winter Homeschool Conference down in Utah, and she was telling me that it doesn't really matter what kind of curriculum you have. If you don't understand some basics behind it, you won't be very successful. Can you kind of expound on that, of what you mean? What's behind that?
Oh, so I think what you're referring to, basically, when we teach parents how to teach math, it doesn't really matter what curriculum that they're using, really. The thing is that the principles behind teaching math are that we really need to make sure our students are given the opportunities to think. So right now in math education, what's happening is that the students are given this is how you add. And they give the kids a step-by-step, I'm going to do it, and then we'll do it together, and then you go and practice So that's kind of how every kid learns how to do math. How I learned how to do math. It's the traditional way, is what we call it. But as I started to teach, I started with my nieces and nephews. They lived 2 doors down. I was really lucky. And basically, as I started to teach, I realized that all of mathematics, like every mathematical principle, the students can discover for themselves. So they don't need a textbook or a teacher telling them how to do the principles, but that they could figure it out on their own. And when they figured it out on their own, it became way more meaningful to them. It also, they were much more likely to retain and remember what they have learned. And they just seemed to like doing math more because it became something that they could create and something that was theirs.
So did you give them an idea of what like the answer should be, and then you say, okay, well, how, what's some ways you can come up with that? I mean, how do you get them so that they find a way to do it themselves?
Yeah, so what I found out as I was teaching my nieces and nephews, and then soon after, like, their friends, it kind of word spread that I was teaching math, and basically what I discovered was that was what I call the discovery method, which is where you give problems to the students that they've never seen before. So, like, for example, if I had a student who was learning how to add, let's start with adding. If I had a student who was learning how to add, what I would do is I would give them a bunch of story problems, like 10 story problems that involved addition. And then the student would go through and they'd just use their brains. They'd use their logic. They'd draw pictures, maybe use some sort of manipulatives like blocks or beans, and they would find the answer, right? So if Johnny has 2 dogs and his cousin has 2 more dogs, and how many dogs they have altogether. Right? Kids can totally figure those things out. And so once they've done that a bunch of times, then we say, all right, so what did you do? Like, how do you add? Right? You were doing it. You did it for all these problems. Now, how do you do it? And so then they communicate, well, you take the first number and you find that many things, and the second number, and then you put those together and you count up what you have. So they're coming up with that way that we would normally teach them.
And it kind of sounds like, you go through, you don't necessarily start with like addition sentences or something. You actually go through just talking it through. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah. Well, we have word problems for them, but it's a lot of just, and that's why being a mentor is so important in this part, which is why I focus on the teaching of it and helping parents teach it, because it's just a lot of asking them really good questions so that they can just think through and discover it for themselves. They definitely need a guide through that process. They just don't need to have someone telling them what to do. They can actually do it with the right kind of question asking and giving the right types of problems.
And then they figure out their own theories, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because you were saying, like, in the bio, all the teaching that you learned on how to teach math didn't work. And I mean, what do you see the problems being in that of our current system?
So basically what's happening right now is we've industrialized the way that we teach. Basically meaning we're saying, all right, we need to get all of our students to go through this program as quickly as we can, gain the same type of knowledge in the same type of way, just for efficiency's sake, right? We're just trying to get them through. Mm-hmm. And so what that's causing is it's kind of forcing teachers to say, all right, this is the way you need to do it. And I'm going to teach everyone the same way because it would be hard to try to teach to everyone's different learning style.
And to listen to each kid. Yeah, to listen.
And so it's just harder that way, and we can reach more students if we just say, you do this, and then do this, then do this, then do this, and go and practice. And kids can gain that knowledge, but they're missing a very huge part of mathematical thinking. And they're not being forced to do any sort of problem solving, any sort of original thought, because it's all being told to them.
Yeah. So what do you think about Common Core math? Because, I mean, from what I've read, that's the theory behind it, is that they're trying to teach them different ways to do math and then have them, kind of use critical thinking. And then they want them to actually write out how they came up with that. Do you see problems with the Common Core math, or is there parts of it that you like? Or, kind of give me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so Common Core math, I think their heart is in the right place. So, like, they had an idea that they would kind of introduce the students to all these different ways of thinking about math. And they were hoping that by doing that maybe a few different ways would connect with them. So I think that was kind of what they were going for. However, in practice, so when they actually implemented that, what ended up happening is that they were trying to do that in a very industrial way. So they were saying, do this way of thinking about it, like do this way, and then do it a bunch of times. Now try this way, which is different than the way before.
So they're teaching them different ways, but they're kind of like, oh, well, we want you to do it this way now. And then, so they're still forcing, their style on it, right? Is that?
Exactly. So the problem that the kid is still not doing any of it themselves, like it's really not their thinking or their work, still exists. So even though they tried to have them see it different ways, they're still forcing the kid to think of it in a specific way instead of allowing them to discover it themselves.
Wow. Well, and I think that would just seem confusing because then you're like, okay, do it this way. Oh, now I want you to do it that way. And they're not, computer, you're turning a child into a computer and then expecting the program to just flip just on a switch. And so.
Totally. That's exactly what's happening. And then parents are feeling a little lost because the way that they were used to seeing these problems, they're now being changed a bunch as well. And so now the parents are feeling helpless in being able to help their child with their math because there's so many different ways of doing it. But and their child is still being expected to do it in a certain way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mess.
We're making a bigger mess than we already had. What was you talked about teaching your niece and nephew. How did the inspiration for your curriculum begin?
Yeah, so I was working at BYU. So I was a TA for a long time. We were doing research. And what they taught me at BYU was called the task-based method. So basically where you give the student a task and they have to solve it, and they use their problem solving, and they develop these mathematical ideas from that. So that's the way I was taught to teach, and I really loved it. But it was really different from the way I was taught math. And so when I was in teaching at Yuma High School, my first year, I was kind of forced back into this. Just teach the way that you were taught, because just tell them what to do. It's so much easier. All of my peers were doing it, and anyway, but I knew it wasn't right. I knew it wasn't the most effective way. I knew it wasn't the way that would really get students to learn and get excited about it. So I started to teach my nephew first. And his name was Jay, and he was 7 at the time. And we had just a normal fraction textbook. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to take some problems out of the back of this book, and I'm going to give it to him. So I'm not going to teach him how to do it. I'm just going to say, Jay, what do you think about this? And so I'd give him a problem from that section that he was learning, and I would say, all right, what do you think? How do you think we should do it? And there was never a time that he couldn't figure it out on his own. Like, not one time. And I just saw how his brain was starting to really open up, and he was starting to do all these things himself, and he was starting to think critically and logically at 7. And I was like, wow, this is really incredible what I'm seeing here. And so I started to teach his cousins, and then his cousins' friends, and I just noticed with these kids that their excitement for math and their ability to think mathematically was growing because they were being given all of these opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
And that's when I started when I discovered the discovery method, because I was like, oh, if we just give them a chance to do it and to try it and to think through it, then they can come up with those procedures, their own way of doing it on their own. Yeah,
kind of a trial and error type thing, like Absolutely. Let them fail at it and, let's try something else. Is that what's behind it?
Exactly, yeah. And so because a lot of times they'll do one thing for one problem, and then they'll do something else for the other problem, and then they'll try something else, just depending on what numbers they're given. And so and some work and some don't work. And so part of their process is what we call testing their hypothesis. So they'll come up with a hypothesis that's like, oh, I think you do this every time. And then we'll have them test it, and sometimes it's not going to work.
So the scientific method kind of in math.
Yeah, it's a very scientific method, yeah. And so, like, one student was doing two-digit multiplication, and he said, well, if there's a 0, then you can just add a 0 at the bottom and then cross it out and ignore it like it's not there. So that was his kind of hypothesis for when you multiply with a 0. And then we put a 0 in the middle of one of the problems, and it didn't work. Because it works pretty well when it's on the end of a problem. If you're multiplying by a power of 10, that's okay, or by 10, and that's okay. But when you put it in the middle of a problem, it just doesn't work. And so he had to kind of say, wait, my theorem didn't work. Why didn't my theorem work? And then he had to make it more clear and really, really understand that principle at a deeper level.
Wow.
That's what we're looking.
So you basically, as a mentor, you're there just to go, well, that's not quite right, and then, let's rethink it. Is that where your mentor would come into play, or?
Yeah, it's even more like, try it on this problem. So I'd give him a problem where I knew it wouldn't work, and then I'd have him come up with the fact that it doesn't work. So he would say, oh, wait, this doesn't work. And then find the times where, find a way to change his hypothesis so that it does work.
That's awesome. We're going to take a minute and learn more about our sponsors.
Hey, Firestarters, this is Mark, producer of The Luminous Mind. If you're like me, the thought of going out to the store and shopping is enough to make you want to crawl in a hole and hide. If that's you, then do your shopping online through Amazon. Just go to theluminousmind.net, click on the Amazon link, and shop away. Also, most of the books and resources that Rebecca and her guests discuss can be found on our Amazon links as well. Again, if you're like me, you have already accidentally signed up for Amazon Prime. So most of those purchases should have free shipping as well. Good luck!
Back to the Luminous Mind with Emily Dyke and Math Inspirations. So before we get into the products and services that you offer families, at what age do you recommend parents starting this type of curriculum? Because I just can see if you're an older student and you're used to that compulsory, like you will do it this way. Can you start it older and have them be successful, or do you recommend them being younger?
It's definitely harder when they get older because they're so used to being told what to do that it's kind of, they go, wait, I have to think for myself. And it takes time for them to readjust to a different way of thinking about it. But personally, for my own child and what I recommend for families is I would definitely start them no matter how old they are. Because for me, mathematical knowledge isn't super important. Like the gaining of actual mathematical knowledge, like we don't use math a ton in our daily lives, which seems weird coming from a math person to actually admit that or say that. But the truth of the matter is we just don't use it a lot. And there's all of these tools and technology that do the calculational part of math for us.
That's
so
true.
For me, the most important thing is that our students learn how to think and learn how to think mathematically and can think logically and can analyze the data that's coming in. And so no matter how old my student is, I want them to think that way. That's way more important than gaining the mathematical knowledge.
Yeah. Well, and I heard somewhere that after the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, somewhere in there, everything that you learned about math, just basically repeats. And so it's not like it's rocket science. You just get to a point, it's just, more multiple problems, or I don't know how to, more, they just kind of get more difficult, but it's kind of the same methods. Is that true?
Yeah. So Jackson actually calls it the spiraling method, which is where you touch on something and then you don't go super deep into it, but then you touch on it again and you touch on it again. And so, when I was teaching I was teaching Algebra 2, and the first semester of Algebra 2 was reviewing Algebra 1. So because these kids just don't really
retain it,
learn it.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't retain it, and they don't really ever learn it because it's never theirs. They never own it. It's always someone else's, and it's just them following someone else's processes or procedures.
Well, and I remember going through the system, and like one teacher would do it one way, and then I would, like you said, you get a different teacher and go on to a different year, and then all of a sudden the other teacher's doing it another way. And you're just like, I just remember being ultra confused all the time which way to do it. So,
yeah. And
so
then
that's true.
Kids are becoming really, really dependent on some person as an authority figure.
In the room,
Yeah, they feel like they can't do it on their own, which isn't very good for their confidence.
And then they go, I can't do math. They throw up their hands.
Yeah, and so a lot of adults even feel like they're just not a math person, or they just can't do math because they were always so reliant on someone else to help them.
Yeah,
they
that's
didn't
true.
feel confident to do any of it on their own, which is why parents have such a hard time teaching math or feeling confident that they can teach math because they feel like, well, I never really knew it. It was always someone else's knowledge.
Yeah.
So how can I be expected to teach it?
So what services and products do you offer families?
Well, what we offer right now is we actually have a course for parents to help them gain confidence in math and to help them build a good environment in their home when it comes to math, and how to ask the right questions so their kids can really own their own mathematical experience. And teaching this way is harder for parents because parents were never taught this way. It's something totally new, but also really old because that's the way, before they industrialized it, that's the way they learned math. That's the way they thought about math. Anyway, but
kind of a hands-on approach to it.
Yeah, very discovery, very hands-on, very scientific. And so parents kind of need help really learning how to implement that and make that change in their home and what it would look like. And so we offer a 10-week course for parents. In fact, we have one starting February 17th.
And do you do those webcasts?
Yeah, it's an online classroom. So it's on Canvas, if you're familiar with Canvas. And you log on, and there's me and my PowerPoint, and you can ask questions and answer questions. So it's like an online classroom.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, it's really neat. And then we have office hours so parents can call in and ask me questions, and I'm able to really do a lot of one-on-one consulting with the parents in my class to really make it a super powerful experience for them and for their families.
And so what other do you offer a math curriculum, or do you just offer helps on how to teach it and then they use whatever curriculum they have?
Well, at first I just had parents use their own curriculum, but it got to a point where parents are like, this is really hard, having to find the right problems and then ask the right questions and do it all themselves, especially when you have kids in different places of their learning. So I actually am currently in the middle of writing a K-8 curriculum. So we have our first unit done, which I give to all of the families that sign up for our course. So they get that first unit, which is our basic operations unit. And then by the fall, we will have all of our curriculum units available for families to purchase as well.
That's pretty interesting.
And so it goes along with the discovery method. So the fact that I just give them all the problems that they can use to discover, and then all of the problems that they need to test their theorem to make sure it works so that they know it will work every time. So it really goes with the class.
That sounds great. Can't wait to see. So what successes have you seen with people that are using your products?
Well, the biggest thing, at least in my opinion, the thing I love the most is that families are finally feeling like math is something that they want to do. That it's not just something that they're checking off their list every day. They're like, all right, got to get my math done.
Yeah.
There's an hour with my textbook. Like, it's actually something that they enjoy doing. We play a lot of games, and so we actually have a games book that we give away for free. If you just go to mathinspirations.com.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
We have this games book that we give out because games is just such a great way to get kids engaged in thinking, and they're having a great time while they do it.
Kind of a hands-on, back to that hands-on.
We call it hands-on math.
Well, see,
it is very much
perfectly named.
Yes. And so, anyway, and so just seeing the feeling of math in homes starting to change and feeling like it's not a burden anymore, but it's actually something that is helping kids think and discover has been it's been great. I've loved to see that for my family. I get emails all the time with parents who go, all right, I didn't tell my kid what to do today, and they actually figured it out.
And there's probably a time when you finally have pretty much asked all those questions that help inspire the right kind of thinking, where they are doing it on their own, right? And
absolutely. My nephew and I now, when we work, in fact, it was helpful here because I was working with him right before, and said, all right, here's your stuff. Here's what you're going to discover. I have to go do an interview. He'll just be able to figure it out, and he'll think through it, and he knows where to go and how to figure things out on his own now that he's pretty much self-directed, with just some help from me getting him the right stuff.
So what are some long-term goals that you have for your business? You have classes every 10 weeks. Is it every 10 weeks?
It's a 10-week course, and we'll have them starting probably every 5 weeks.
Okay.
So I'll have to going at a time every 5 weeks. So we'll have those. It'll be great when our curriculum is all completed and available. And then from there, I really just want to provide as many helps for parents as I possibly can. So training videos and videos of me working with students to kind of see what it will look like, and blogs and all of that fun stuff that as soon as my curriculum writing is done, I'll be able to work on those.
Oh, that would be great. So what changes would you like to see in the world in this area?
No, I kind of get it, because really our big thing, our company, in fact, our purpose is to help families raise self-reliant thinkers. We really want people to learn how to think for themselves, to think on their own, and to have that confidence. And so for me, it would just be in any area, in any type of curriculum or in any type of teaching, that type of thinking and having kids learn to think on their own is really stressed, and is the main focus of our learning, is for them to develop that thinking.
Do you think it works better in a homeschool situation, or have you ever used your curriculum in like a brick and mortar school?
I've tried it in groups before, and it's just hard because kids will find the easiest way. So if some other student has figured it out already, they will latch on to that idea, and then it will lose their own opportunities to figure it out on their own. So I definitely think homeschooling is the best model for that.
And kind of because
they get that one-on-one attention.
Yeah, and there is no teacher standing over them, saying this is the way that you do it. And so then maybe that naturally forces like, wow, I got to think this out by myself instead of being told what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when parents are not relying so much on those textbooks to do the teaching for them, but they're relying on the student to really do it, to figure it out. And especially with math, sometimes it's hard for parents to let them do it because we've never seen it done before, but it really does work.
That's awesome. So before we say goodbye, do you have any advice or encouragement that you would want to give to our listeners? And then also give us your contact information on how we can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. So my piece of advice, probably the thing that will change no matter what curriculum or math that you're doing, my advice for you is just to let your kids work through it themselves. Let them struggle, which is always hard for parents to let their kids struggle, but if we let our kids struggle, then they will learn how to do hard things. They'll learn how to discover math. They'll learn how to think for themselves, which is always our number one goal. And if you have questions or want to learn more about us, you can go to mathinspirations.com and make sure to sign up for our free starter kit, which will include that book of math games.
Well, I am definitely going to check you out because, like I said at the beginning, math is one of those areas that, when I started homeschooling years ago, people were like, well, how are you going to teach your kids algebra? Luckily, I've had to do what you suggest. And I don't know sometimes. I mean, and, I thank my lucky stars that the internet's here and the kids find resources, but and I've seen that work, where they take it on and they do it themselves, but that's one area that I definitely feel like I want to learn more about how to better teach it as well as know how to do it. So I'll definitely check it out. So
Great.
Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us.
You're welcome.
It's been so much fun talking to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Emily Dyke and math inspirations, go to our show notes on theluminousmind.net. Also, when you're there, be sure to subscribe to our free email list. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content by subscribing in iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. Tell us how we can help you. We want to continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.